Stockton Street Tunnel and landing on a car. I'm not giving away any secret because this happens on the first page of the book. And from there, and from there, the action just keeps going on and on. As I thought about that, though, I realized, isn't that about a half block away from where Bridget O'Shaughnessy bumped off Miles Archer? This is a good San Francisco tradition. You know what I'm talking about? It's about that same spot. And that tells you a little bit about the San Francisco lore that's either written into or implied in all of John Lescroart's books. They are really good. Thank you for being here, John. Come on up.
Thank you, Bill. Bill is great, by the way. He likes to be self-effacing, but he's got a great book out, too.
Not self-effacing. Thank you. I'm self-promoting.
He's an arrogant son of a bitch. And his book sucks. Hey, I'm claiming the podium here, you know what I mean? So anyway, thank you for coming out on a Thursday night. I woke up this morning in Minneapolis. I've been on the road for 9 days. If I fall down and my forehead hits this thing, please forgive me. I don't mean anything bad by it, but I'm getting a little tiny bit tired. But I'm here, and I'm glad I'm here. So I'll talk about the fall a little bit, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, because every time I come here, I feel like with family anyway. I think I recognize everybody here, and we can talk about various things to do with publishing and to do with writing. This book began in a very unusual way for me because I couldn't think of an idea at all. And I had been maybe casting about for something to write for maybe 4 months after I had finished my last book. And one of the ways I try to kind of get the spirit going is I try to just make up first lines that are fun. And so I sit down, and this is kind of goofy but true, and I just think of cool first lines, like, the bomb in the baby carriage was wired to the radio. I mean, that's Paul Simon, but that's the kind of thing I try to do. And I sit down and I write a first line. And one day, after about 40 of these first lines, I wrote, "The body fell straight out of the sky." And I went, that's a great first line. So I said, wow, I'm going to just continue writing. And so I wound up in the next 2.5 hours writing the first 3 chapters of this book. And I said, wow, if that's not narrative drive, I don't know what is. So it was it was a perfect opportunity to just keep going. So I just said, here I am, I'm writing this book, the body fell out of the sky. Going to see what happens. I'm about 40 pages into it. I don't outline at all when I'm writing. I just try to find interesting scenes that I'm going to be writing about, and if they don't interest me, they won't interest you. So I'm very tough about it. If it's not fun for me to write, it's not going to be fun for you to read. But I was about 40 pages into the book and kind of stumped again. And I kind of ran up against this wall about what's this book about, who's in it, what's going on. And Rebecca Hardy, who many of you will know as the Beck, who we have known since she was an infant, literally. And we've watched her go through so many teenage and young children moments, based just a little tiny bit on my own daughter. It's a wonderful girl who I love desperately, but now she is a 28-year-old working attorney in San Jose. And all of a sudden, Rebecca, Hardy's daughter, not to be confused with my daughter, shows up on the page. And she happens to be working in Hardy's firm. Now, this is not, preordained, because we knew from the keeper, I knew from the keeper, that she was already in law school, she was on that path. So it wasn't ridiculous, it was just a little bit of a stretch. And I wanted to say, get out of this book, because I don't want to start writing about my daughter here, even obliquely. I actually called up my daughter and I said, Rebecca's here. And that's kind of a code word between Justine and I. And she goes, yeah. And I go, I think I'm going to make this book about her. Because she was on the page and she was just being dogged. She was like really in Hardy's face and talking to him, and really they had a relationship, which we all know that they have. But all of a sudden I'm going, this woman is going to take over this damn book. So I called up Justine and I actually asked her, I said, is this going to bother you if I do? She goes, no, I really always love the Beck. You know, I think it's really cool the way you kind of made me part of your thing. So I said, great, I think I'm going to do it. So I sat down, I got Rebecca in the book, and she took over. So, you know, it was kind of fun watching her work with her dad and figure out how to do the law in real practice and go through the kind of changes that people have to go through. Ironically enough, we're suffering through that now as parents much more with our son, who is now, believe it or not, another working attorney that my wife and I have produced. He's working in Fresno as a public defender. And he is going through the same kind of frustrations and changes that the Beck goes through in this book. So that's been really kind of fun, and it was fun writing the book. The other thing that was kind of interesting about the genesis of this book is when the murder happened, I knew that I needed something to make it more than just a murder. The murder, you know, you always need a murder in a mystery story. It's just part of the gig. So I wanted to have it be a little bit of a special murder and have some kind of a social aspect to it. So the woman who fell from the sky in the first page of the book is an African-American 17-year-old foster child. And it seems that one of the supervisors in San Francisco was all over the district attorney's office and the police department, both, for not treating black deaths as seriously as white deaths. Ring a bell with anyone? Yeah. And this was before Ferguson happened, before any of the events of last year.
But after Trayvon.
After Trayvon, but it was definitely in the ether, and you know, I decided that that would be a good thing to use, not only to buttress the plot, but to give it a more heft and a little bit more power. Interestingly enough, I thought at the time that it was an anachronistic idea, that the chronology was wrong, that we didn't have that problem anymore. To the point that I called up my consultants and my agent, and I actually asked them, I said, do you think this is kind of like am I just reaching it, you know, grasping at straws for something interesting to write about? Because I'm always drawn to those kind of social conflicts, and racism is a good one. But, you know, looking at it just kind of coldly, I said, basically, this is a good one. This will drive the plot. But I wanted it to be realistic enough that I felt like I was dealing with a real issue. And I actually thought that the issue was passé enough that it might not work. And fortunately, or unfortunately, it works. It really works. And it drives the plot of this book through almost to the very end of the book. So these books are a gas to write, and to try to write serious topics and make them still fun to read. One of the other things I like to try to do is put a little bit of humor in these books. I myself am humorless. It's, you know, I'm very cynical and don't really laugh very often. But I do enjoy the odd moment of kind of goofiness that occurs in some of these books. And this book has like a long running thread that has to do with our own Buster Posey from Plans. And you know, people wonder about how do you write these books and make them seem like they're relevant, and you pack them with stuff that's really going on in the real world. And not only the racial issues in this world, or the parental issues that I'm dealing with Dismas and Rebecca, but you know, the whole idea of how to tell a story that makes you feel satisfied at the end and tells you something at the same time and entertains you throughout. So I am delighted to give you guys the word that only came out yesterday, that this book just debuted at number 10 on the New York Times bestseller.
Great.
You know, when you've been on the road like I have for the last 9 days, you know, you feel like you've done it for something when that happens. Because my agent literally called me and said, "Hi, Mr. Bestseller," and I went, "You're kidding. That's not possible." And he went, "Well, yes it is." So I'm delighted.
That's great.
Yeah, it is great. So does anybody want to talk about anything to do with the publishing industry, or Dismas Hardy, or Abe Blitzky, or Rebecca, or any of that stuff?
I have a question.
I'm gonna answer.
The settings are absolutely fabulous,
Thank you, Mom.
even though we can't find the lyrics. But, it's like, to me, they would just lend themselves so well to an
movie.
incredible TV series.
Really? Could that be? Let me tell you a story. You'll like this. 2 years ago, Lawrence Fishburne optioned all of my books. People are going, not really. Yeah, really, he did. And he got a showrunner named Dan Gordon to put together the show. He was going to be Abe Blitzky. Powers Booth was going to be Dismas Hardy. Everybody signed on. We got all the studios involved. We had, because everybody, all the actors and the showrunners and everybody else all were connected to different studios. We got all the studios on board, put together this deal. They were going to be doing this exact thing, kind of like Blue Bloods, except that it'd be Dismas Hardy. The Hardy Chronicles, it's going to be called. And right up to the night before we were going to sign the deal, we were told, we're done. We're going, we're signing tomorrow, and we're rolling. And tomorrow came, and they said, we changed our mind. Really, the day. Yeah, so really, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me. I got the number 10 bestseller, and they can't take that away from me. But really, it drives me
Well,
insane.
being a San Franciscan native, I just absolutely love your stories.
Thank you.
I love the settings, I love the places.
You want a microphone? Everybody hear her well? Thank you very much.
Has the option expired?
The option expired 6 months later. And now, ironically enough, there's, I talked to my agent yesterday, and now my agent, my theatrical agent, that is the movie person, somehow has discovered a book of mine called Guilt that she now thinks is, movie material.
How old is that book?
104 years old. But it is the book that introduces Wes Farrell, and evidently Wes Farrell she thinks could be a good character. And I said, he has occurred in all of the last 17 books. It's not like I hid him under a rock. And she went, well, I really just thought that, I really would look and find the book that would really make it more than any other one. And I went, what about, I don't know, this book called The Fall? Anyway, Hollywood is a hard one. Yes.
When do you write?
When do I write? I'm writing right now.
Nobody.
No, I'm kidding. I write every day. I have an office in downtown Davis, and I go in there every day, probably around 10:30, and I sit there until 5 in front of my computer and try to write. Some days nothing, some days 10 pages. But I try to keep it rolling. I have a new 3-book deal with Atria, and I am currently about 95 pages into the next book, which I have no idea what it's about. It's so true. Yes?
What's the difference in sales between, let's say, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and where were you, Minneapolis?
Yeah.
What percentage of sales are done in this area compared to the other large areas?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know where I sell. Those big cities are where I sell. I promise you, I don't sell in St. Louis. I think the Midwest is not my big place, although in Minnesota last night I had a tremendous signing. But the night before that in St. Louis, I had a signing set up like this one. Not one person came. It's not a big deal. I'd woken up that morning in Columbus, flown to Detroit, flown from Detroit to St. Louis, checked into the Four Seasons in St. Louis, and drove 17 miles to the venue.
Not a big deal.
And not only was nobody buying the book, nobody was in the bookstore.
Oh my God.
The Cardinals.
And I went the drama, the glamour, the beauty of being an author.
Thank
And
you
it
for
turns
being
out
here.
this was a bookstore that had never done a book signing. They'd only been open for 7 months, and they had never done a book signing. And I don't think they're going to make it till next year. And I wish the best on all indie bookstores, please. May heaven rain down joy upon them. but this was a bad experience. Yeah, in the far back.
Are you from the Bay Area?
I am from the Bay Area.
Okay, and are you by trade a lawyer?
No,
You're not.
I have never
But
been
yet
to
you
law.
produced 2 lawyers.
I have produced 2 lawyers. Well, my wife really played a bigger role than me. But yeah, I don't understand that. The only thing I know about the way these books became law books is I published, my first book was like a literary novel, and then my second 2 books were Sherlock Holmes pastiches. And then I decided to invent this guy, Dismas Hardy, set him in San Francisco, and he was a bartender at the Little Shamrock on 9th and Lincoln, which is a real place, which is where I was a bartender. So it's, couldn't have been more real to me.
And were you raised in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I was raised in Belmont. I went to Sarah High School.
Okay.
The same high school that the great Tom Brady and the great Barry Bonds. Really, I used to feel better about saying those things. This last, never mind, but geez. Tom and Barry, really, I'm sad. But one of the things that happened is after those first 5 books that I wrote, nobody was buying those books. I wasn't making any money. I was working a lot of double, jobs, full-time jobs. And I decided after I had a little bout with spinal meningitis, I was in a coma when I was 41 years old for 11 days. When I got out of that coma, I decided enough of this day job stuff, I'm going to write a different book. And I wanted to write a bigger story. I wanted to have a large palette from which to draw from. I wanted all kinds of social issues in the book. I wanted a lot more goofiness and a lot of fun. And I wanted to have kind of unrelenting suspense, which was not really the hallmark of my first 5 books.
Oh, so you were later in life is when you actually became like more of a successful writer?
45 years
Wow.
old. 45. I know you're thinking, but wait, you're only 45 now.
Exactly. That's what
A lot of people make that mistake. But,
She kissed the Barney stone.
so it was interesting because I moved to Davis and then decided to write this big book that happened to be a legal drama, just because my other efforts at that had not garnered me any money, really. Couldn't make a living. So I decided to write this different book, and because I didn't know anything about the law, I turned to my best friend from childhood, a guy named Al Giannini, who is a working homicide DA, both in San Francisco and in Redwood City. And so he basically let me live with him for a couple of weeks, and I followed him to court, and I kind of learned the language. Then I wrote this big book, and then I sent it to Al, and he corrected it for all the legal errors, which were huge. I mean, there were 1,000 errors in 500 pages, at least. And so I went back and rewrote the book, corrected all those errors, sent it out, and sent it to my publisher, and he liked it, but he didn't pay me for it. But the good news was, in Europe, Germany wanted to buy the book and the other preceding books. And then the same day, I believe, or one day away from that, Japan decided to buy the book. And they decided to buy it for 6 figures each.
Wow.
It's more money than I'd ever made in my life. So I thought, wow, I could possibly make a living doing this. And the next thing I knew, I knew I had some time, and I wrote another legal thriller called The 13th Juror. And that book became a giant international bestseller and sold 4 million books. Wow. So after that, I was kind of motivated to keep going the legal thing. And since then, there's been 26 of them, right? 26, I think.
You don't remember.
I don't remember. I'm thinking 26. And, the last 18 in a row have been New York Times bestsellers. It's wonderful.
And my last comment is,
Yeah.
I think it's great that you used the foster child in this one, in the fall.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's, they don't get enough attention.
No, they don't. Well, I'm a big supporter of the CASA group, court-appointed special advocates. And Wyatt Hunt, turns out one of my characters is also a foster child. So this thing has become a kind of an unwitting theme in all of my later books. It's just once you get kind of caught up in the drama and the reality of that situation, it's hard to create, a more obvious, sympathetic person than a foster child, because they get no breaks. And that's what I'm glad to be able to address. Yeah,
How do Nooks and Kindle books affect sales of hardcovers?
how do they affect sales of hardcovers? They just rate sales of hardcovers. They're hugely more successful in hard numbers.
Do you get money? You get
Do I get money?
from a Kindle?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, but let me just tell you something. Okay, you know this is awful. You know, number one, let me just say, I'm so glad that anybody buys my books in any form. I'm grateful, thank you so much for the support. But a Kindle book pays me about 70 cents.
70 cents?
70 cents a download. And a hardcover book pays me about $3.50.
Wow.
That would be a 5 times difference. And it's totally cut the legs off many of my friends who are authors. They can't make it on the, ebook income. And I think it's across the board. Hardcover books are probably 25, maybe 30, getting generous, maybe 30% of your sales now. So 70% of my sales come from ebooks.
I think it may be more
Maybe more, says Bill.
mystery and genre books.
Yeah.
I think ebooks have cut
Right.
into it more.
I mean, the good news is the numbers of ebooks are big. They're big. But even with the big numbers, they're not comparable to the kind of, profit you can make from selling hardcovers. And the other thing that the publishers have done is, I think, a terrible disservice to themselves, to say nothing of their authors. They all agreed to this thing called the agency agreement. And the agency agreement basically sets the price of the book at like $12.99, which is the top. And then the publishers, in the old days, when you had a hardcover book, you had to wait a year if you wanted to get the paperback. So there was a real, there was a bonus if you bought the hardcover book. You read it right away, you've been waiting for it, you want to get it, the excitement builds up and you buy the book. But nowadays, with ebooks, both Nook and Kindle, or any of them, you can buy them the same day the hardcover comes out. So your option is buy a $30 book or buy a $12.99 book, or on Amazon, buy a used book for $3. And by the way, on day one, you could have done that with the fall. So it's a very conflicting and difficult time for those issues. Yeah.
A couple of questions. So the ebook sales, though, they are applied for the bestseller list as well, right?
Well,
It's a different.
yes, but it's there are different bestseller lists now. Now there are something like 7 or 9 bestseller lists in the New York Times every week. And one of them is combined print and ebook.
Okay.
And that's what I came out at number 10, which is wonderful. I'm delighted. But for hardcover books, they knock off the counting at 15, the ones they publish in the paper. So mine, the fall is number 20 in hardcover books only. But if you include all sales, it's number 10. So it's a big difference. It's a huge thing. And what's the other question?
I've read all your books.
Thank you.
And I found you probably when you were maybe 10 or 15 books into it, so I was able to start reading. I read them straight through, one after another,
Me
which
too.
is the way I love to read.
Oh, you guys are great. Thank you.
And when you
Here's
write,
the microphone for you, too.
when you write, by the way, I'm almost finished with the fall.
Don't tell the ending.
I won't say
Okay.
a word. But I'm curious, when you write, do you see a real live person in your character? In other words, who, if you were casting the books,
Yeah.
who would you use
Oh, I
for
don't-
Wyatt Hunt?
I don't really do that.
You don't do that?
I don't do that.
You don't see
They're
anybody?
their own persons in my head, but they are not actors. They are their own selves.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Wyatt Hunt to me, if somebody said, well, who would you make an actor to play Wyatt Hunt? All I know, it wouldn't be Lyle Lovett, but, and I love Lyle Lovett, but, probably Wyatt's a little better looking than Lyle. But other than that, I don't really have any thoughts about it. I mean, they become their own human beings in my brain, and that's who they become. And by the same token, the the idea of what they sound like to me is really interesting because it doesn't come, it's not translatable. I can't like use voice recognition software and try to write because the voice in my brain is not my own voice that comes out. And I've tried to do that. I've tried to use voice recognition when I had carpal tunnel badly. I was trying to figure out what I could do otherwise. And I just tried to, talk out loud and speak into a, tape recorder. And I couldn't find my guys in my own voice. It's all in the brain.
So do you write one book from beginning to end, or do you have like several,
Do I write one book from beginning to end?
or
Yes.
or do you have like several plots?
No, I write them one at a time from beginning to end. Yes.
John, I'm just going to suggest, because I've seen this with the Sherlock Holmes stories, they've been dramatized with progressively younger characters.
Yeah.
And you have such a stretch of books. I think part of it is that they're not looking for our demographic in the TV productions.
Well, I hate to say that I'm cynical, but I did say that already once. But Rebecca is not old.
I know. That's
She's not old. And I'm thinking, that's why when my theatrical agent says, let's go to Guild, I'm going, well, we could, but we could also go to The Fall because it's got a 28-year-old beautiful woman as the star of the show. But
Should be good.
should be good. Everybody write a letter to your congressman. This is a travesty going on in your district. Yeah.
Do you make a list of interesting words and then insert them in these books?
She does one word.
I've never been asked that question. Do I make a list of interesting words and insert them in the book? No.
Okay.
Is the answer.
What about?
Why do I use interesting words?
What about nimbostratus?
Nimbostratus.
Yes,
It's a real word.
I know.
It's got
I looked it
clouds.
up.
Yeah.
But I have never heard it before.
Oh.
Never, and I've never seen it written, and here, it's a great word because of, the locale and the
I'm
kind
going
of
to take a
weather.
little nimbostratus break and get back to you. Yeah, I don't know. I have the vocabulary I have, and to me it's limited. I just am constantly frustrated by not finding the right word.
But what you do have is a good legal vocabulary. I mean, things like a Murphy conservatorship.
Well, that's just
Things like-
research.
Yeah, I know.
Murphy
But-
conservatorship. I mean, I love that. I wanted to use that line. Number one, it takes up a lot of room on the page. And if you use it 6 or 8 times a page, it's a much, leaner page, But yeah, I guess I try to use the right word. But nimbostratus was obviously the right word.
It
I'm
was a
sure I
great
looked it
word.
up when I used it.
It's a great word,
Yeah.
but I just had never seen it before, and then I thought about you, and I wondered if you found these interesting words and just, had a list.
Oh, I find interesting T-shirts. And I do write those down and keep a list. But, those are different things. Yes.
How much time do you devote to fact-finding and research? I guess this kind of ties into the earlier question.
Well, it all depends on where the plot takes me. I mean, quite frequently I'll come in the morning and I'll start writing and I'll realize I have no idea what I'm writing about. So I'll do a Google search and usually that'll give me a hint. And then I'll say, but this is something I really have to know about, so I will call up, sometimes just cold call somebody, and say, hi, I'm a novelist and I'm writing a book about your topic, your livelihood. What does a fireman do? How does it really work when the alarm goes off? Or if you were a nurse, what would you do if you were in the ICU? And you'd be amazed at how many people really want to talk about their work and their jobs and their loves and their passions. And it's fascinating. People talk. And I do a lot of that, calling people literally in the middle of the day without warning and just say, hi, this is your friendly local novelist and I need some help. And people help. So, and then when the books are finished, then I turn them over to experts, especially in the legal field. My buddy Al, he'll be counted on to find 2 mistakes a page, no matter what I do. And, in a 400-page book, that gets a little tedious. But he's usually right. And so I try to incorporate his changes into books. And then I send them to other professionals in whatever field I might have been writing about. And they usually help me out. And hopefully by the time the book comes out, there's not too many errors.
And then you take them out for beers or what?
As a matter of fact, it's been known to happen. You know, I'm well known at Sam's Bar and Grill in the city. In fact, my picture's there above the door when you walk in. And my basic theory there is early in the process, I take out my buddy Al and a bunch of cops, and I get them drunk. And you know, they're ready to talk, and that's when the secrets come out, and that's when it really gets fun. And I try to do that early in the books usually, so I can kind of
Have a
play
little
it forward
recorder?
and have fun.
Have a little recorder in your pocket?
I don't have a recorder, I have a very good memory. And I'm probably not as drunk as they think I
I figured that.
am. Yeah.
How attached are you to your characters? For instance, do you think about them between stories? And
Yes.
and then also, I think I asked you this once, is it a struggle sometimes when one of those characters needs to go away? A few books ago,
Yes.
one.
It's very difficult to kill people. I mean, especially people you love, especially in these books. My characters are just like friends to me. I mean, Lisa and I will tell you, you know, quite frequently we'll be driving around San Francisco and we'll just go, oh, look, that's where Wyatt had that thing with so-and-so, and this is where Dismas, you know, was almost shot. And, I mean, it's like ridiculous because, you know what, they don't exist. But their existence is very real to me. And I do think between the books what I'm going to do. And if I have to kill one of them, I never think of that before the book. But sometimes in the middle of a book, I'll realize, shit, I'm going to have to kill somebody here. And I mean somebody who matters. And let's not talk about the details, but also, you know, you need to have verisimilitude. There's no point, I mean, if you're reading one of my books, and I didn't do that a couple of times, you'd go, well, why am I worried about this guy? He's going to be fine. Because, you know, John's not going to kill him because he's a star, you know, huh? So I killed him, you know, on several of these guys.
Do you always write sequentially?
Yes. Yeah, I write from page 1 to whatever it may be. And that's because I don't ever have outlines. You know, which I should. I know I should. And I try to make outlines. But that's just not the way my stories grow. They grow tenderly. Not tenderly, tenderly.
Oh, my gosh.
T-E-N-D-R-I. Nico Stratosley.
It's gonna be in the next book, you're right.
That's great. Yes.
I'm fascinated by your description when Dismas cooks with the cast iron pan.
Yeah.
Do you personally cook?
Yeah. Yeah, I got the cast iron pan. My mom gave me the cast iron pan when I went off to college.
Wow.
And it's a 10-pounder, it's, you know, 12 inches across, and I treat it the way Diz treats his, and mine is just as good as his. You know, it's like hematite, the front of it is just perfect. And nothing sticks to it, and I use it certainly once a week, and oftentimes 3 or 4 times a week, because I'm the cook in my family. So, you know, I do a lot of, most of the time I'm the cook. My wife is in the audience, so I can't lie. She does wonderful cooking sometimes. But I use the black pan a lot more than she does. Yeah.
Who's your favorite?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a favorite contemporary writer that you like to read?
Favorite contemporary writer? I think my general answer to this is I love T. Jefferson Parker. He's kind of my favorite, you know, just as a guy that I just can't believe how well he writes. But I'm also, you know, I'm a fan of William Kent Kruger. He's a guy that I was with last night in Minneapolis, and he's a fantastic writer. He won the Edgar Award 2 years ago, I think, for Ordinary Grace, which I highly recommend. Who else do I love? I'm really enamored by this new guy named Jean Verdun, and he wrote a book called Think of a Number, and then he has 3 more after that, and he is just a tremendous weaver of puzzles. And he writes just terrific books that I find fascinating. And then the last one I have to say is kind of my favorite writer of all time is Patrick O'Brien, who wrote the Aubrey Maturin series of books.
Master and Commander.
Yeah, Master and Commander and all of the following 22 books. And I would have to say in terms of just style, he's the man. for me. He's just unbelievable. There was a period of time for about a year that I couldn't make myself read anybody else. I just went book to book to book to book. And you know, it's kind of like getting hooked on John Lescroart. You know, you just start. What are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do? This guy is not Lescroart. Yeah.
I was also born and raised in San Francisco, and my first 10 years out on 47th Avenue between Geary and Ansley.
Wow,
And the
you were
whole
there.
thing- Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about the fog,
Yeah.
definitely. My mom would say, okay, get your jackets, we're going to the beach. You know?
Yeah.
But,
very
but
generous.
they, and I've lived in other areas of the city, by Mount Davidson, so there's the fog. But down at Sutter and Stockton,
Yeah.
it's sunny.
It can be.
When the fog burns off.
Yes.
See, because for a long period of my life, I had to work downtown, San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so I'd see the fog burn off as I was taking the bus down, and then it would be gone all day.
Yes, except in June.
Yeah. Oh, that's it for sure.
Yeah.
And tourists didn't know to bring their sweaters. Yeah,
Right.
that's a good one. But but anyway, it burns off, and so that one part I kept going. Wait a minute, no, there is some sun. And one time you actually had the sun on that little grassy area or whatever outside the building.
Yes.
That was my one
Okay.
thing. But anyway, no, but I kept going on with that. And then when you do mention the places, I can just, since I lived in various areas, I
Yeah.
go, oh yeah, that's there. Oh, I know where that
I
is.
use real places 99% of the time.
Yeah,
It's only when I'm going to have a place that you're going to get ptomaine if you eat there.
Ah,
You know, that I make up a different name.
Good.
But most of the time, it's real places, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, it's great having a conversation with all you people. It's really terrific. Thank you so much for coming out. And if you'd like, I'll sign some books and
We like.
chat some more.
Thank you.